Welcome to this First Advisors Investor webinar with me, Giles Rafferty. Today's webinar features the AML3D Limited, which has the code AL3. AML3D uses its advanced technology solutions to create industrial-scale metal components that are stronger and more resistant than the equivalent traditionally manufactured part, using a production process that dramatically reduces waste and lead times and also improves ESG outcomes. AML3D's proprietary Archemy wire additive manufacturing system, which combines sophisticated software, advanced robotics, and leading-edge metallurgical science, makes AML3D an industry leader in industrial-scale 3D metal printing and a technology disruptor of the metal fabrication industry. Today's webinar is expected to run for about an hour or so and be split into two sections. The first section will consist of an introduction by AML3D founder, executive director, and now chief technical officer, Andy Sales, and a presentation by new CEO, Ryan Millar, that will be followed by a Q&A session. Should you wish to ask a question, you can do so by typing your question in the Q&A box on your screen. We will endeavor to ask as many of your questions as we can during the course of the webinar. I would now like to hand over to Andy Sales.
Well, hi everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today AML3D's new CEO, Ryan Millar. Ryan brings an exciting breadth and depth of skills and experience in scaling up technology companies, along with commercialising IP that will drive the next phase of AML3D's growth. Having Ryan as CEO allows me to take on the Chief Technology Officer role and really focus on maintaining AML3D's technology leadership globally through enhancing our WAM technology further and remaining as leaders in this space through continued innovation and commercialising our R&D projects. This will allow AML3D to expand and deepen our commercial relationships in the oil and gas, defence, aerospace, and marine sectors over the longer term. But for now, I'd like to introduce Ryan and hand over to Ryan.
Thanks so much, Andy. I'm really excited by the opportunity I see at AML3D. But before we get into that, this is a standard legal disclaimer slide that I'm not going to dwell on. Should members of the audience wish to read it in detail, it's included in this webinar's presentation slide deck, which is also available via the AML3D website. Next. This slide contains the agenda for today's webinar and lists the areas I will be talking to today. As you can see, there'll be a chance to be a part of a Q&A session with both Andy and I at the end of the presentation. Next. As I said, I'm really excited by the opportunity I see at AML3D. That's because with my skills and experience, I can see how I can really drive the growth of the business, but also because I've had the privilege and time to gain a clear understanding of AML3D and its technology. I had the advantage of consulting directly to the board and Andy at AML3D in the 4 months prior to taking on the role of CEO late last month. What I see in AML3D is a company that has market-leading additive manufacturing technology. Our Archemy system has very few peers in the wire additive manufacturing space, possibly one or two in the US and one in Europe that we can see. In fact, it is the combination of our sophisticated software stack, which glues advanced robotics and leading-edge metallurgical science, which gives AML3D a clear competitive edge. Not only are we an industry leader, but the innovative work being led by Andy in our R&D developing our software and metallurgical science, in addition to the collaboration with universities to develop additional materials, will keep us at the forefront of this industry. We're a clear leader in wire additive manufacturing at an industrial scale, right at the time when the demand for our technology is surging. I've literally just returned from 10 days in the US talking with clients and prospective clients, and I'm happy to report there is huge interest in adopting AML3's patented technology to solve some of their pressing manufacturing challenges. So I see the right company with the right technology and at the right time, and I believe I'm the right leader to maximize this next stage of AML's journey. My career has been built in the tech sector. I have built, led, and scaled up and been part of high-performing, tech-centric, and pure-play tech businesses, both locally and internationally. My track record is one of expanding existing revenue streams, building recurring revenue, managing costs and commercializing IP, and also building great teams. I'm so excited by the talent around me. Andy's built an amazing foundation and footprint within the business, and I'm very much looking forward to leaning on him and helping him drive the great R&D projects he is now leading to underpin the future of AML3D. And that's not just about the next generation of materials. It's also about developing our software and alchemy platform to ensure that we do remain as the market leader. I'm also really excited and impressed by Kerry Owen, our new VP of Global Sales. Kerry was traveling with me while I was meeting clients and targets in the US, and she's still there continuing that work at AUSA, the largest Army and Defense Conference Expo in North America. Kerry has over 22 years of experience in international sales and business development and comes to us from GE, but had worked for almost 20 years in the US, including at EY and Gartner. Kerry will be vital to building a team and sales organization at AML3D, which will be critical to our success in these next stages. So as I say, right company, right technology, right time, and with the right leadership. Next. And that highly experienced, highly credentialed, highly skilled team extends to the AML3D board, which only last week welcomed Noel Cornish as chairman. There is an amazing blend of skills and experience available to me via the AML3D board, which strikes a great balance between the established board members and a new chair, between direct operational experience of the business and the independent non-execs. I've already benefited from the chairman and the board's guidance, and I know they share my commitment, enthusiasm for driving really hard and maximizing the value that AML3D can generate for shareholders and all of our stakeholders. Next. I believe that the investment thesis at AML3D is very compelling. We have a proprietary market-leading, in-demand, disruptive, wire additive manufacturing technology that delivers value for customers, such as faster lead times, solutions for supply chain constraints on sourcing parts, and the delivery of higher quality components with improved ESG outcomes. We have a multi-phase growth strategy that will add and unlock value over the immediate, medium-term, and longer-term time horizons. We're addressing a fast-growing high-tech market where demand for our technology is surging and forecast to continue growing. And AML3D is not restricted by geography, with a tech solution that can be deployed here in Australia and just as easily in North America, as well as Europe and Southeast Asia. Next. If we look quickly at the highlights from FY22, we can see that there's a really strong foundations that are already in place. We generated 2 million of revenues from sales of alchemy systems, predominantly into universities for R&D and skills development purposes, and also by winning contract manufacturing work. We're already very active in accelerating our R&D to support that longer-term growth. These foundations built around our existing client relationships with global tier 1 companies, including a North American aircraft and aerospace manufacturer and a major Australian energy company, have created a phenomenal platform from which to accelerate sales of our easily deployable and supportable alchemy systems as an enterprise-level offering to future clients. Converting these enterprise-level opportunities has always been a key part of our growth strategy, but with the existing interest and demand that we're seeing from prospective clients, it will become an increasingly core focus for AML3D as we move forward. We'll also continue to invest and build out our contract manufacturing capability, which is a critical part of the strategy for bringing new clients on the 3D printing journey, starting with technical evaluation and proving our technology advantage, right through to adoption. Across both our enterprise level offering and contract manufacturing, we will be progressively incorporating the outputs from our R&D initiatives to add new features to our alchemy system and further innovate our software and materials development to maintain that market leadership. Next. We have clearly defined target markets, and we have achieved world-first accreditations and certifications of our WAM technology with agencies such as the Lloyd's Register and DNV. These are significant achievements for AML3D. These certifications provide us with even greater advantage and a compelling proposition to our maritime and defense clients. The key targets are oil and gas, defense, marine, and aerospace. And as is often with the case with commercial and in-confidence discussions and negotiations, we're not always at liberty to disclose who our counterparties are. I can, however, remind you of whom we've already announced contracts in May this year when we became an approved supplier of additive manufactured parts for a major Australian energy company. In June, we signed a manufacturing purchase order with a large oil and gas tier 1 to create the world's largest metal printed commercial pressure vessel. Then in July, we signed a purchase agreement with a large North American aircraft and aerospace manufacturer that has subsequently increased by 150% in this last month. I already mentioned I was in the US over the past 10 days, where Kerry and I were invited guests of the US Navy's submarine industrial base out of Danville, Virginia, where they are developing a purpose-built 3D manufacturing center of excellence. Whilst there, I encountered significant interest and demand for additive manufacturing systems across defense, but especially in the maritime sector. This demand is a direct result of President Biden's Additive Manufactured Forward, AM Forward initiative. There's absolutely no doubt that we're targeting the right sectors and building increasing momentum with runs on the board. Next. I'd now like to look at the extraordinary opportunity that I see to scale up AML3D's business across multiple markets and within different time horizons. Next. We have built an amazing foundation from which to accelerate the growth of AML3D, scaling and capturing some of the fast-growing demand for 3D printing. We're in the privileged position of having won global clients through our contract manufacturing business. We have also successfully deployed, installed, and supported multiple Alchemy systems. I've personally spent time in the market face-to-face with existing and prospective clients and see the opportunity to position Alchemy systems close to the point of need in order to deliver a solution that negates existing supply chain constraints and risks, delivers parts faster, and provides clients with greater control and flexibility over their own industrial manufacturing capability. Add to that the ease with which AML can be deployed and configured in any market globally, and you have the key ingredients to scale up our business. I see contract manufacturing growing and playing a critical role in client acquisition, but I also see tremendous opportunities for enterprise-level Alchemy systems to meet the growing demand in our target markets, especially the US, and particularly the defense sector, both maritime and aerospace. So as we scale, I see enterprise Alchemy systems becoming more of a core product offering, where there is an opportunity to drive greater margins, deliver more profit to the bottom line, whilst contract manufacturing continues to grow, but represents less and less of the overall revenue pie. Our R&D is going to allow us to develop new and innovative ways to configure our Alchemy platform to win more clients, potentially outside of those existing target markets, and to provide innovative materials and alloys to meet the demands of a broader and different set of use cases. Next. If the last slide is what AML3D brings to the party, this slide is the actual sizzle. It supports what my own research and time spent with clients and prospective clients has found, that there is a growing and large additive manufacturing market globally, and especially in the US and in Australia, where there's an emphasis on rapidly building sovereign manufacturing capability. AML3D is incredibly well positioned to benefit from this growth as a market leader in wire additive manufacturing. Next. And while AML3D was founded and developed here in Australia, in Adelaide, that tech advantage of a turnkey solution with a software stack incorporating robotics and welding in an easily deployable and configurable manner allows us to pursue growth in other geographies. Our Alchemy systems can be placed directly at the point of manufacturing need to solve those supply chain and lead time challenges, and we can remotely access these systems in order to support and configure them from Australia if required. We already have deployed an Alchemy system in Singapore at ST Engineering, a case of supporting another contract manufacturer to meet their own client needs. We've already met the most stringent global standards, which give our existing clients confidence in our technology, but this also makes us extremely attractive to new maritime and oil and gas clients globally as we scale. Our demonstrated ability to deploy Alchemy systems into RMIT, the University of Queensland, and the Flinders University BAE Systems Factory of the Future means that we have demonstrated that AML3D is ready to meet the demand for full service enterprise agreements with our commercial clients. Those contracts will be higher margin and include supply and support for our Alchemy systems with training, design services, software licensing, and annual recurring revenue through support agreements. Next. Our differentiator in the WAM space and what makes AML3D so different as a leader and a manufacturing disruptor is based on technology. Configurable software, the glue that brings robotics, welding, and our deep understanding of metallurgical science and parameters required for different materials, alloys, and geometrical shapes. Next. Simply stated, AML3D can produce stronger, higher quality components when compared to traditional manufacturing processes. We can produce components that are up to 75% faster with a significant reduction of waste, sometimes a saving of 80%, and a process that meets and exceeds the most stringent global standards. Beyond that, our R&D systems are designed to ensure that we maintain that market leadership advantage by improving the Alchemy system so that it has faster deposition rates or even multiple robots laying down beads of metal simultaneously and creating stronger, lighter, and more corrosion-resistant parts so that we can address additional target markets here and in the US. Next. In my view, AML3D is incredibly well positioned to accelerate and scale from this point. Next. Our growth strategy is built around 3 horizons and is designed to add value at each stage. Our immediate horizon is about leveraging our contract manufacturing capability to service our existing clients, and it is delivering with significant purchase contracts already in place and expanding within aerospace, defense, maritime, and oil and gas. Over the medium-term horizon, it is even more exciting as we expect contract manufacturing to continue to grow, but the significant opportunity will be building high-margin enterprise agreements around the sale of our Alchemy systems. A big focus here will be the US and defense contracts within maritime and aerospace. There are also opportunities in the oil and gas sector to solve point-of-need manufacturing challenges with our existing clients and winning new oil and gas and energy clients. We also see opportunities in Southeast Asia, beyond Singapore, and eventually in Europe. We'll maintain our leadership position across these markets by continuing to overinvest in our R&D for software and in metallurgical science. Next. As we scale up, we also expect to see a commensurate increase in the value we create for our shareholders. I am here to deliver this next phase in the company's journey. We have the right technology. We're working with the right tier 1 global customers. We have the right build of skills and experience within our leadership team. And we have a demonstrated ability to deploy our Alchemy systems, which will lead to future high margin enterprise level contracts with new customers globally. Together, this represents an ideal platform to scale up AML3D and move it on to the next phase of our growth. Next. I just wanted to thank you very much for your time today and the opportunity to share this update with you.
Well, thank you for taking us through that presentation, Ryan. We'll now move to the Q&A section of the webinar. And just a reminder that Andy Sales is also available to answer any questions that have come through. I do have an opening question, and it's around this shift in the focus, it feels like, towards Alchemy as an enterprise over contract manufacturing. Can you give a sense of what the balance is, what you think the optimum balance is between Alchemy and contract manufacturing?
Look, it's a great question. I think a shift in focus is probably too strong a word for the present. I think the immediate term is obviously an overweight focus on contract manufacturing and Alchemy sales. So I think it's fairly even in that short term. I think in the longer term horizon, unless we scale our factories globally in other regions, similar to what we have here in Adelaide, it'll naturally become a smaller and smaller proportion of the overall pie. So I think as we look at markets like the US and how we scale into those markets, whether it's through direct sales or partner-led sales by signing up value-added resellers and distributors in the United States, we're going to see that the contribution to the business from a revenue perspective is going to be led by growth in that strategy in selling Alchemy systems. So I think while it's not a case of de-emphasizing contract manufacturing. I think it's vitally important. I think from what I've seen in the just on 4 months that I've been here at AML3D, it's an incredibly important part of the customer journey. We're building parts here in Adelaide for clients globally. Those clients are trusting us to build those parts, but they've been doing it on the basis of they want to validate the technology, and they need to go down the journey of validation, certification, testing, non-destructive testing, and at some point it moves on to a different phase of the journey. I don't see it being incompatible with, at some point, some of those clients might decide that actually having that manufacturing capability in the form of an alchemy unit closer to the point of need becomes, a conclusion they draw.
Thank you. I've another question here. It's around the R&D component. There's been R&D projects in play with scandium and aluminium to strengthen aluminium, and there's boron nitride nanotubes. The question is, with Andy's focus now on the R&D, as you take on the CEO role, is there a way to give us a sense of what the timeline there is before you do commercialize these things, before they start to come through? We've heard a lot of conversations around, they're getting close to commercialization. Can you put a timeline on that now?
Look, I think it's very difficult. It's probably something that will become clearer for me, I guess, in the next, 3 to 6 months. There are many R&D components to the business, and they have different emphases, and some are for internal purposes, and some are client-driven. Some of the client-driven opportunities, and we're obviously working with clients to develop different alloys and different materials, more exotic materials that specifically are going to meet their end state objectives. So that's some of the R&D that we're doing. A lot of the R&D that I also think we should be focusing on, which will have an entirely different set of timeframes, is comprised of our software roadmap. I'd like to get to a point where the software itself is not only hardened and more robust for future deployments internationally through partners, et cetera, if that's a pathway that we wind up pursuing. But that part of R&D is also incredibly important. So it's around the sophistication of the platform. It's around building new features that are client driven. Some might be client paid for. So yeah, the R&D piece is a big amorphous bucket. But yes, there are some projects in there that are specifically driven for clients.
A question came in from an anonymous attendee, and there's no obligation for the audience to give their names. Could you kindly update, it's another timeline question, this one, could you kindly update on the timeline of the printing of the largest pressure part for Exxon? Is there scope for growth for more orders of this nature?
I don't have that time frame at hand. I don't have that at hand at this stage. Look, the relationship with that particular oil and gas company, I think, is going to deepen quite significantly. We have an opportunity to certify the part that we're building for them, and that takes on a completely different angle. It will have a significance that's just beyond building a pressure vessel of a significant size. It becomes a much deeper working relationship at some point.
I have a question from Scott Maddock, and it's, how do you see alchemy sales and distribution process changing over time?
Great question. I think at the moment, I think in the very short term, we have been super successful in selling alchemy units. And I think of it in like a student edition, a student licensing, if you like, or a university licensing edition. There's obviously much higher levels of different types of configuration, but they're much larger enterprise systems. I think those enterprise systems are the ones that we'll be deploying, obviously with global tier ones and potentially in the defense maritime sectors over time. Whether we do those ourselves or whether we engage with partners in the regions that we're intending to target for obvious reasons, North America, and to some extent here in Australia, and work with partners to become the services arm, if you like, to deploy those systems, to provide the distribution support in the form of spares and parts, et cetera, and all the warranty around that, and the response times to get on site and replace parts or do various things. I think that's a preferred model for me. I think there's a scale breakpoint where it becomes all our own services. So I think looking at that partner-led model, not necessarily from a sales perspective, but from an implementation delivery, services delivery perspective, I think makes a lot of sense to me at this stage from where I sit.
Another question is around where the business goes from here. And the question is that it seems like the strategy is pretty much as was. So what is it that you're going to do to accelerate this? How do you accelerate it if the strategy is as it always was?
Yeah, look, a great question as well. I think the key thing for me is not to radically change the strategy. I think the strategy in and of itself is robust. I think the key thing is to look at some of the levers to build out the platform. So I think the software platform, there's obviously some investment in the R&D around that to enable us to get to that next phase of our growth. But I also think there's a growth journey. There's a natural awareness journey. There's a Gartner hype cycle for everything, and there probably is one for additive manufacturing. I haven't seen it, but there probably is one. I think we're at the stage now, from what I can tell, the clients I've met, and I've spoken to a lot of existing clients and prospective clients, and that 10 days in the US was extremely informative. Additive manufacturing seems to have turned a corner, and I'm not sure if it's in the last 6 months or the last 12 months, but there's a real push. And as I say, Biden's policy around additive manufacturing has meant that there's a huge emphasis on not just building parts with additive manufacturing, but building a sovereign manufacturing capability in the US. And I think, that there's a benefit to us for that. So some of it is good timing. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But also we need to be able to build a business that scales on the back of a really strong sales strategy. And Kerry has obviously got those skills and that experience. We need to move our posture from being more responsive to far more deliberate about how we try and attack some of these markets, particularly the US.
A question here, getting into the specifics, I think around contract manufacturing. It's about the relationship with Boeing. And it says that there's been a progression through it that's been announced. There was a contract that's up 150%. There was the inspection of the Adelaide facility. Where do you see the relationship with Boeing going?
Look, the relationship with Boeing is probably one of the most exciting relationships we have in the company. And as I said in one of the earlier slides, one of the things that really impressed me about AML3D, and unfortunately, a number of these customers we're not permitted to formally speak about. We don't have that permission for them. But looking at the internal slide of some of the logos that we have either spoken, we've either done stuff with or we're doing things with, is incredibly impressive. Boeing is right up there. We've got a phenomenal opportunity with Boeing. They're going through a very deliberate process, as you would expect with an aerospace business. I don't want to speak on behalf of Boeing, by the way, but I would imagine that their process of really evaluating the technology and the components and the parts that are being delivered is a prime focus for them, and we're obviously on that journey with them. Again,
looking at I think specifics, there was I don't want to name names because I just heard what you said there, but in the defense space, there was a body armor relationship that was being developed, and then there was some discussion of AML3D taking that on. Can you give us any update on where you are on the personal body armor contract?
The body armor contract was a little before my time. I don't have a lot of details on that. Andy, you might want to answer that one.
Yeah, I will answer that. That's, again, as Ryan's alluded to, some of these engagements with these companies, especially in defence, because it's a defence application, take an immensely long time to actually validate. So the relationship's still ongoing. We don't have anything sort of announceable anytime soon, but we are looking at, new scope going forward. There's been some tests that were done and quite successful earlier on in the year. The main thing here, though, with our Lightforce relationship is that they undertake the BD of that component. We're simply the manufacturer, so we haven't been included in the BD and the pushing of that actual component. And so there's some constraint there, but we are gaining a bit more traction. But for everyone out there, our past work with them, even though it has been long-winded, it's all headed in the right direction. And as Ryan alluded to before as well, now that I can focus on the more technical part of the company, growing our R&D and getting that to commercialization, that's one project I will be spending a lot more time on. So
another question here is to do with this idea of staying ahead in the technology space. It says, with newer wire-based printers coming onto the market now, how would the company respond and differentiate itself? Do you see yourselves akin to Stratasys almost a decade ago?
I think I might answer that question, Ryan. Sorry. So I guess where we focused alloy development in new wires in the past has been very commercially focused on either a certain niche part across the industry. That being said, what we've announced in the past is the high strength aluminium project with Deakin University and the BNNT boron nanotubes strengthening opportunity with Deakin also. Now, they have progressed very well. We've actually extended those recently, and there will be some testing and news out sometime in the new year as we come towards the end of those internal projects. There is a larger project that will then be aimed towards commercializing, but to get to the point, it's very focused in that aluminium space. There's huge opportunity in the aluminium sector, much more than, let's say, the titanium sector. It's about 10 times more. There's much more components. There's a lot more inquiries with higher strength component aluminium rather than anything else. So we're very focused where customer inquiries are coming from. So hope to have some news out soon about that.
There's a question here which it may well be directed to Ryan, and it's around this idea that there's R&D is a bit of a focus on the software side of things, and people are wanting to say, do you view, from a technology point of view, do you see AML3D as a manufacturer or a software, or how do you see the balance within the technology piece?
Great question. I mean, I think it's a fundamental question that I had to ask myself when I was first involved consulting to the board and also to Andy. I think it's a manufacturing business with a heavy technology-centric sort of core to it, if you like. I think the software is fundamental to the value and the intellectual property of the business. The software is not just off-the-shelf software that glues these components together. You've got, high-end welding units like Fronius. You've got robotics like ABB. You've got all the controls, the slicing software. You've got all those components, and it needs to have a software layer or platform that combines all of those third-party systems into an easily deployable, easily configurable system. So I think it's really the secret sauce of the intellectual property of the business is that glue that binds that stack together. But I think if you extend beyond that and say, well, what's possible with that stack? We know that some clients are never going to want to have cloud deployed Archemy units. They just, for security purposes, they'll want to control the software on a server, probably very close to where that Archemy is deployed. But there's no reason that we can't fly or drive or manage these systems completely remotely. So I think the software needs to take on its own, its own path of evolution down a prescribed roadmap, which looks for easier configurability, partner-led configurability at some stage in the future, and ultimately the ability to drive systems wherever they might be. So if they are deployed in 15 states in the US, but they're managed out of a specific hub in Illinois, for argument's sake, that's possible. So I think the software piece is very important. Not to simplify it too much, but I can go and buy an ABB robot tomorrow. That's not hard, but the value and the IP has been built into that software stack. There's three components really. There's the software component, which glues robotics, welding, and a lot of metallurgical science and a lot of parameters to build parts. And those things are all joined together through software.
A question here about where the focus is in terms of markets. Because you've mentioned that you've been in the US, that Kerry, the new global VP of sales or VP of global sales, is in the US. So is the US the focus for the business?
Great question. I think that ultimately the US must be a big focus for us. You know, I think from what I remember, Australia is 2% of the global market and the US is somewhere near 50% of the global market. So I think it's a natural extension for the scale part of the strategy to look, you know, very directly at the US. I lived in the UK for many years, very familiar with the European market in a different life. It's a far more complex market to penetrate. You need obviously the language differences, even different parts of Germany, different parts of France, completely different strategies, different clients, et cetera, et cetera. I think the US from a scale perspective is a naturally attractive market for us. But I also think timing is incredibly important here. And it's not to say we've got all these genius ideas about the US suddenly being a phenomenal market. It's going down the path of building sovereign capability at scale as quickly as it possibly can. And a lot of that is on the back of, as I say, Biden-led initiatives like AM Forward. So I think partly timing, partly the size of the market, and partly the ease of which I think we can penetrate that market in comparison to other markets. I think I can see a question here, so I might just look at that myself. What human capital strategy are you putting in place to grow capacity and skill set to support these horizons? Mindful that the war on talent will continue in the new tech space. Yeah, look, completely agree. I mean, part of the series of meetings in the US, and I think where the US is getting ahead of this curve, partly because there's a drive to build sovereign capability for themselves, and connect that with various programs underway from a defense perspective in the US. But they are building capability and training people to use advanced additive manufacturing technologies such as ourselves. So I think we can leverage from that. I think there will be a skills and talent pool in some of those markets that don't exist here. So I think I'm not as concerned about that as I would be in other industries. I think, as I say, from what I can see, there's an opportunity to potentially employ from those talent pools. I think from a sales perspective, finding and identifying salespeople for Kerry's team, which I think is going to be a key focus for us for the next 12 to 18 months, finding key people and building that team out, maybe into industry verticals like the defense sector specifically, or oil and gas, is going to be key. Finding great people, paying them what they want to be paid to make sure that there's value on both sides is always a challenge. And then obviously retaining them by building a great culture and making sure that we're a place they want to be working for. And not only is it an exciting business, but they feel valued and there are career development opportunities for them. Andy, was there anything else from you?
No, there was nothing else from me. And I guess if there's no more questions, then unless Ryan, you wanted to close off with anything, I certainly don't, but we're certainly happy to receive questions afterwards, send through to the company secretary or the investor email. I'll leave the last bit with you, Ryan.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, look, I can't see any more questions coming through. I can see a little quick Q&A, but there are no more. Just wanted to thank you very much for attending today. As I say, extremely excited to be the new CEO of AML3D. Very excited by the opportunity that we have. There's a phenomenal opportunity for us from a growth perspective. I think we're coming off a great platform that Andy and the team have built. And I believe, as I say, right time, right place, right people, and we've got everything that we need to get cracking. So thank you very much. I'm going to close off from here, and thank you all for attending.